Welcome to the In Between podcast. Today I am chatting with Chief Executive Officer of Ronald McDonald House Charities of Greater Las Vegas, Alyson McCarthy. Before her time as CEO of Ronald McDonald's House Charities of Greater Las Vegas, Alyson spent 20 years as a television news anchor and consumer investigative reporter for News 13 Inside Las Vegas and 8 News Now. Alyson is a dedicated wife and mom of 3 boys and is highly active in the local Las Vegas community, which is how I connected with Alyson. And I think it was a Vegas Young Professionals event that I saw her speak at, and then I came and toured the Ronald McDonald House Charities buildings, because now you have multiple, and we've been developing our friendship ever since. So Alyson, thank you so much for joining us on the In Between podcast.
Oh, Cassidy, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come and tour the houses and to invite me to be on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes. Well, when I saw you at the Vegas Young Professionals event, it was such a fun conversation, first of all, because I feel like, when do you get to sit down with 3 incredible local nonprofit panelists and learn about the ins and outs of what you guys do? Obviously, we know it's hard. You guys work very hard for what you do, but to learn about locally where we're at and how organizations are being funded, and I mean, down to the nitty gritty of bigger organizations to smaller organizations. And, one of the things that I admired about the conversation was you explaining that Ronald McDonald House and how you guys run things is a little different, right? You guys are a part of a greater organization, but you are a solo organization. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Right. I think a lot of people are used to top-down organizations whenever there is a mothership, right? But, we have a global organization, but the chapters, the individual Ronald McDonald houses are all their own 501c3 charities. So we were here in many cases before the global organization came around to try and bring some synergy, some universality, some just trying to make us a little more standardized and provide resources. So that's the wonderful thing about our parent organization, is that they literally have creative sources for us, resources, and they have brand modernization guidelines for us because we use the McDonald's name. So we have to be very careful. McDonald's is our Golden Arches mission founding partner. So a lot of folks mistakenly think that we are the McDonald's charity because McDonald's was one of the organizations that founded us, but actually that's not true. We do not receive corporate monies. We receive monies from our local small business owners that are McDonald's restaurant owners. There's 12 of them here in Las Vegas, and they support us, and they provide a wonderful 8%. We're very grateful to get it, of our budget every year. But the $3 million comes from the community, Cassidy. It comes from every $25 check and every $1,000 grant we get.
Yep. And I think that's what was mind-blowing to me, right? Is because you're using that McDonald name. I, as, just a Las Vegas local, would think, oh my gosh, probably they're getting tons of donations from that name.
Right.
And that's such a disservice to your organization, because it's you're really not. And after learning that, and I'd love for you to speak about your roundup, because that's another great initiative. I was like, wow, actually this organization locally needs our support.
Well, thank you for saying that. Absolutely. And I think one of the things I like to say is what's raised here stays here. That's another misconception, but it's also really important to the donors who support a charity to know not only where the money is going, but the money is going to help local residents and residents that are in Nevada. So that is one thing we'd like to let folks know. The Ronald McDonald houses, they will take care of and support families who have to travel to Las Vegas. But half of those families live elsewhere in Nevada. They are in small, tiny little frontier communities where they might have a community health clinic. But if you have a premature baby, or your little one is diagnosed with cancer or gets a burn, you're not going to be able to get the highly specialized care you need in those frontier communities. So they need to come and live in Las Vegas for days, weeks, even months. We've even had one family stay 2 years, Cassidy, through the protocol of cancer. So, and then the other half is from surrounding states and from our tourists who come and they'll be doing a baby moon, and all of a sudden they go into labor 3 months early, and next thing you know, they're here at our house as well for months at a time. So we get every diagnosis and every type of family. We see them in all shapes and sizes.
What do you think are some misconceptions that people have about really Ronald McDonald House Charities and what you guys do?
Yeah, I definitely agree that the first one is that they think that we are the McDonald's charity when we are all our own charities, and we do keep our money that we raised here to spend here. And I think that's really important. You know, if you go to round up your order at a McDonald's, all of those pennies and nickels and dimes, the average roundup is about 40 cents, stay here to go to our house. If you round up in Southern California, that roundup money stays and serves the houses in Southern California. So each charity gets to decide what their programs are going to be and how they're going to implement their services, because guess what? We all know our own communities and our own community needs the best. So I think that would be misconception number 2, is that there is a larger organization telling us what we have to do, and that's truly not the case. We built a second house, and we decided to make it for larger families with longer stays. Well, there aren't any other houses in the whole system that do that. You know, there are some houses that are built to take care of just cancer children, or there's some houses that sadly, but fortunately, thank goodness for the family, are there for end-of-life situations to make sure that family has all the support they need while they transition through what will be the eventual passing of their child. Extremely challenging. I think another misconception is people think it's sad to work at the Ronald McDonald House, Cassidy. They go, oh my gosh, it must be so emotionally rigorous to, work in a house where children are always sick and the families are sick. It's the exact opposite. We are a house of light and hope. And the families come home from the hospitals every day because they are drawn to the light and hope in this house, because it's a place of joy, and it is a place of immense love and support. We call it the house that love built for a reason, and that's because the staff, and particularly the other families that are going through very similar situations as what that family is going through, they can get just the kind of support that they might not even be able to get from other members of their own family who can't truly relate to what it is like to have a child, a son or a daughter, in critical condition, hanging on to dear life, fighting for their life in the hospital. It's a club no one wants to belong to, but they're awfully glad that the house is here when they need us.
Yeah, and I have to say, as someone who's been to the house, it is full of joy, and it is full of just people who are ready to love on you and spend time being there for you. And obviously, each family is going through something hard, but it also allows for community. The new house has such a great courtyard for people to connect and spend time together. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the new house and the old house, because now you have two, and how that new house does really transform what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. So I'm coming to you from the original house. This beautiful house was just recently remodeled, and it was built in 1998. So we're celebrating 27 years in the original house. This is 12 rooms in a very communal environment. So that means the kitchen, the living rooms, all the common areas for that matter, the outdoor playground, the indoor playroom, the Raiders room that you were in. All of those are shared by families who have their own bedrooms and their own private baths. But when they walk out the door, it's very much like a little boutique hotel. They're in a very communal environment. Same laundry room. They go and have a big dining room where they can all break bread together at 6 o'clock every night when volunteers come in to cook dinner every night. Now, you juxtapose that with 2 blocks away right behind me in the residential area, because we're very close to Sahara and Decatur. We have, you mentioned it, a central courtyard, and it's surrounded by 8 standalone patio homes, each with their own little patio that spills out into this beautiful common courtyard. And in the courtyard are the communal amenities: the playground, the basketball court, the park, the water fountain area, what we call the Zen area. And it's all beautiful, and it can be shared by families who want to have like a little block party. Maybe the 8 of them want to get together and do a barbecue. We have a great big patio that looks like a McDonald's restaurant almost, because it's the Golden Arches, the original Golden Arches, and it makes this beautiful outdoor patio. But the whole idea was that more of our families were staying for longer periods of time, and more of our families were growing in size. And the whole idea is keeping families together and keeping them strong so that they can support the recovery of the little one. The little one is usually in the hospital. So the little ones you saw at the house were the siblings. And many times the siblings, through no fault of the parents, are overlooked because of what's going on in the family dynamic. All of that energy, all of that worry and anxiety is being put into saving the life of the child in the hospital, whether it's an injury or an illness. And so we here at the houses love to love and spoil the siblings and give them all the attention. It's like we're all automatic grandparents or aunts and uncles, right? And they just love it. They just lap it up. And it helps them remember what it's like to be, and I use this word very gingerly, normal family again, in the sense that they can enjoy a little bit of their childhood when their family is going through so much stress. And that stress is not good for anybody, let alone children. So it's all about lifting the stress and being a place of joy and making sure the families capture moments of delight, moments of remembering how life used to be, and that there will be light at the end of the tunnel in most cases. 99.9% of our kids survive. Cassidy, they thrive, and then we get the pictures and the school pictures and the holiday photos, and you saw the great big board with all the faces that have come and gone through the years here at the houses.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I was able to tour those facilities, and I mean, gosh, there's apartments in Vegas that aren't as nice as those. So your team did incredible. And I think you're so right. I mean, I shared with you that my brother passed away from leukemia, and he was 18 when he passed away, but we were a family of 6. And if we had to stay in the Ronald McDonald house, that's 1 bedroom for a family of 6, right? And so how it can change in this new facility, I mean, how many can you sleep in there? Because there was 1 bedroom that had 2 or 3 beds, right?
Absolutely. So we have 1 bedrooms, we have 2 bedrooms, and then we have what we call 3 bedrooms. Even though that one room doesn't have a door between it, it does have 2 queen beds in that one room, another queen bed across. You've got the kitchen and the living room in between. But that was the whole idea, was let's have a master bedroom. Let's have a bedroom for the children. Let's have a room for grandma, grandma or grandpa, or aunts and uncles.
You bring help.
Exactly. When I said families come in all shapes and sizes, we have so many grandparents raising children today, and we have aunts and uncles who are raising children today, and foster parents. There's one very joyful reason that folks come to the Ronald McDonald House, and that's because they're adopting. And they get a call in the middle of the night in New York or Chicago or, who knows where in the Midwest. They jump on a plane because their baby has been born, and they're a perfect match, and they've gone through all of this. And so the family gets to come out, and it takes a few weeks for all of the adoption paperwork to go through. And the child still is in the hospital. Sometimes the child is born to an addicted mom, and so the child needs to be in the hospital long enough to deal with those repercussions, whether it's withdrawal or whether there are in some cases, sadly, permanent issues that have been caused by the pregnancy. So, and there's birth defects, not everything has a reason that's nefarious. Sometimes things just happen, but the parents get to come here.
I had no idea that was even part of it. That's so cool.
Yeah, so those adoptive parents have usually spent a great deal of money and time and emotion to be in a position to adopt in the first place. So if they had to come out and pay for a motel, if any family going through what our families are going through had to pay for a motel or an Airbnb or sleep in their car, I can't tell you how many families we still hear about, Cassidy, because the social worker finds out they're sleeping in their car because they couldn't afford a motel. They don't want to say anything because they're afraid that's going to put them at a disadvantage, or somehow Child Protective Services will be called or something like that. But the fact is, that is a very real situation, and that is what we are here to address and to make sure that they're not having to do sleep in a chair all night, sleep in a waiting room, sleep in a car. That's no way to stay strong for your child. And if you can't stay strong for your child, then your child is at a disadvantage, because families who are supported and who can remain healthy and strong and at least have those outlets for the stress and anxiety. Well, their children, research shows, they cope better for sure. Right off the bat, they cope better with what they're going through. A lot of times they need less pain medication, actually helps the healing process. So in many cases, they even heal faster. All of those three things are research, evidence-based, that the Ronald McDonald House isn't just a nicety, it really is a necessity in this day and age.
Yeah. I think it's incredible that you guys have created a culture that is so positive and warm and welcoming. And although my family and I didn't stay at the Ronald McDonald House, we did tour one in Arizona because we thought we were going to be doing some treatments out there. And I remember, I was probably a freshman in college. And even as a freshman in college, right, touring it for me was so dark and scary, and be like, what? I'm going to have to stay in here? Like, what is going on? And everyone I interacted with was so nice and so kind and warm and positive. And it warms my heart what you say about siblings as a sibling, because it's like, I was in the perspective, right, of, well, my brother isn't really going to be staying here. My mom's not even really going to be staying here because she's going to stay with him. I was going to be living here. Yeah. And I think that's a huge misconception, is people think it's the kids actually living there, which is such a small percentage. Especially if you're a kid with cancer, maybe you come home for a couple days, right? Yes. But unfortunately, you're doing your treatment at the hospital, and it is really serving the siblings, the grandparents, the other parental unit that is not with the child at the hospital.
That is such a good point. That's another misconception. And it's such a wonderful time when we get those short stretches where the patient gets to come home, whether it's because they're in between chemo protocols, or for whatever reason, their blood work is such that they can just come and take a break. The doctors and the nurses and the social workers all encourage that. They know they want these families to be, these children to be around their parents and their siblings as much as possible. So that's just yet another thing. Another thing is people think it's a shelter. Not that shelters are bad. Shelters certainly serve their purpose too. But no, this is a home. This is their home, and we're privileged to work in it every day. And because we can and do, we see these families as they go through their journey from start to finish. And when they do leave, it's kind of bittersweet, Cassidy, because you've come to love them so much, and so many of them stay in touch, where they have checkups and they come back 6 months later, and you see the little patient growing up and how much they run in because they have memories of the house, and all of their memories are that, this is where the play place is, and this is where, that big room with the Raiders, and so their memories are very positive, and I think that's all part of the healing process too.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so appreciative for what you are doing at the Ronald McDonald House. And I want to kind of transition to your personal story, because this is the In Between podcast, and we talk a lot about in between moments, and I focus a lot on females who are doing incredible things and living incredible lives. And in diving more into your story, because we had spent so much time together talking about the Ronald McDonald House, I had no idea that you had a massive career transition, and you are not in the nonprofit space for your whole career. And I would love to talk a little bit about that transition and how you found yourself going to the nonprofit space. And if there were any major in-between moments between deciding that and, obviously the two are so different, from news and television to nonprofit.
Yeah, what is that saying? We plan and God laughs.
Yes.
I am the biggest believer in reinventing yourself now. But I have to say, I wasn't always that way. From the time I can remember, my earliest childhood memories were of, I was going to be a television news anchor. I didn't even know what the name was. I watched them on TV as probably a kindergartner, and I called them a TV talker. So I went to my mom and I said, I'm going to be a TV talker. The idea of being the first to know something and telling other people about it. And it looked so serious and so professional, and it just looked like it was going to be the most fun, challenging, rewarding career I could ever ask for, was a career in television news. And so my whole life was lived in this progression of one goal after another to get there. From being on school newspapers to college newspapers to college radio to college TV to my first job as an intern, and then breaking into the actual world of TV news as a first-time reporter and anchor. So I never knew that I wanted to do anything else. I don't think I ever wanted to do anything else. I was always just so hell-bent, because it's a hard business to get into, to doing whatever it took to get into it. My education was all broadcast news, political science minor. I loved politics. And then I ended up getting into investigative reporting, which is a very complex and fascinating world, but it's also very stressful because you bear a lot of responsibility. So, 22 years later, I am breaking down. I'm literally breaking down. I am emotionally spent. I am so tired. I've had 3 children, a husband who has an accounting firm, and I'm going out every day, and instead of covering the stories that I've worked to source, stories about hope in a recession. We were at the time that I was feeling super burned out. We were going through this recession. It was right after it was during the housing crunch. Remember that? During the housing market failure. And so I had set up, I can even think of the turning point. I'd set up this beautiful story about some kids at a high school they were going off to visit, I think it was New York, and they were all going to be performing, and they had worked and competed so hard to get to this point. And these kids were bright, shiny examples of our youth. And I had set this up, which was incredibly hard, to get their parents to take time off of work, to get them in the theater so they could show us what they're going to be doing, to get them out of their classes, to all make this whole shoot come together. And 30 minutes before I'm supposed to go there, my news director says, "We're canceling that story. I want you to do another foreclosure story." Nothing was set up. There was no person being, in other words, it was just from scratch. I was just going to go out and do another story of misery of another person that's lost a house, and I didn't know where this person was. I had to find them somehow. And I think I broke. I sort of just broke. And I can remember having a moment in the newsroom where I was really advocating for my story. So what did I do? I went out and shopped my story, and then I did the foreclosure story. And I came back and I said, look, I was able to get in both. I could not face telling these parents that we were canceling this beautiful story of hope and positivity so that I could go cover another, even car crashes, things like that. People who are giving of their time and they know that this story is very life affirming, they don't get it. And I don't get it either. And I was at the point in my career where I just didn't get it anymore. If it bleeds, it leads. I was done with that. I wanted to show and tell stories of courage and perseverance and resilience and, solutions. So later that day I came back and I said, look, I'm going to spend my own time writing the story. I'm going to get it edited and all that stuff. And they said, no, you're not going to do that. You manipulated the situation and you did it so that you could get your way. And I did it because it was the right thing. And I said, and it didn't affect my ability to get my story done for the day. And so right then and there I said, I'm leaving. I can't leave today, but I'm leaving because I am suffocating. And I can remember my news director looking at me going, what are you talking about? Nobody leaves this business. You'll leave when we say you leave. It was really a moment. It was a very tense moment. And I said, give me a couple of weeks. You guys can replace me and I can go on my merry way. This isn't working for me anymore. You all have lost the ability to hear what the audience wants, to hear what our community wants. It's just churn and burn, bad news, negative news. And it was a really sad moment. So I quit my job without having another one lined up. But as the universe would have it, as an anchor person, as a reporter, you have to MC and host certain things in the community. And I had an event coming up that weekend for the Nevada Donor Network, which is organ and tissue donation. And I hosted this beautiful ceremony where those who have had loved ones die and they've donated their organs to another person who was on the brink of death but needed an organ, and as a result, their life was saved. This ceremony brought these two sides together, all of the cases for the year, and it was the most emotional event I've ever attended in my life, let alone hosted. I'm up there, Cassidy, in tears from the podium, just trying to come to terms with all the emotions I'm feeling. I think there was a lot that was pent up. And afterward, the executive director of the organization came up and said, Alyson, you seem to be very moved by this mission. We have a marketing position that's opening. Would you like to interview for it? And I felt like it was divine intervention. So I interviewed for it. It went really well. That following Monday, I went back and actually officially gave my 2 weeks of notice. Then I got offered the job then I started, and I had the most incredible year of learning about nonprofit life and what one nonprofit was doing to make the world better. And every day, even though it was a marketing position, I was telling stories about a mom listening with a stethoscope to the chest of a man whose life was saved because her son's heart was beating inside his chest. And the tears just streaming down her face to hear her son's heart beating in another person's chest because he had been accidentally killed. And to me, that was, I get choked up even thinking about it right now. It was a rebirth. It was an absolute renewal. And it was such a leap of faith that I didn't know how it was going to turn out. You talk about an in-between moment. I was so scared, Cassidy. I was in such an uncomfortable space that was sort of forced upon me because I had what was really heading to a mental breakdown, you know. And I'm not afraid to say it. I was on the brink of a nervous breakdown and maybe even going through a little bit of that, and had the courage to step out of my comfort zone and just know that no matter what, I had to get away from this very negative aspect of my life and take a chance on something that was going to be better for me and healthier for me, or I wasn't going to make it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's so powerful. It's such a, when you were speaking, I'm like, wow, like this, you have such trust for the next step, right? Like you heard that inner voice and you were like, I can't do this anymore and I have no idea what's coming next.
Right.
And for you to really lean into that trust to then just days later be offered a position that, again, you don't know if it's necessarily going to align, but you know it's had a visceral reaction to you.
Right.
I mean, that takes such trust. And I assume, especially after you put those 2 weeks in and you started finishing up a 20-year career,
Yeah.
what doubts and challenges were coming up as you transition this role? And I'm going to assume that there was a pay cut and there was changes in how you were going to be interacting with the people that you've worked with for 20 years. So like what challenges and doubts came up of like, maybe I should just turn around and ask for my job back?
The challenges and the doubts were there before I made the decision. The challenges and the doubts and the fear were there. What is that saying? Fear is when you say what if. Faith is when you say even if. So the doubts and the fear were there. But once I had made the decision, even before I had the next step figured out, the relief of taking the first step was overwhelming. This weight was taken off of me emotionally, physically, mentally, where I knew that no matter what, I wasn't going to be stuck anymore. I wasn't going to be stuck in this position that no longer fit with me ethically, morally. The dissonance disappeared. And just the lack of dissonance was enough to make up for the fear and the unknown and the uncertainty. It created such an inner excitement that what I told myself, my inner script was, I'm not nervous, I'm not scared. I am super excited for the first time in a long time. And I'm just going to ride this wave of excitement, and I'm going to make this something. And the story didn't even end there. You know, I was in this wonderful mission for a whole year, loving this, but still volunteering at the Ronald McDonald House. I had been volunteering at the Ronald McDonald House since pretty much I arrived in Las Vegas. And I always thought, wow, this would be a really neat place to work. And I had interviewed for a job when the executive director was leaving, and I didn't get it. And I thought that was my dream job. So my first venture into nonprofit was unsuccessful. You know, I came in second to a woman who'd been in nonprofit for 20 years. Well, it turns out she was on the back nine of her career. She lasted a year, and then she resigned. And so a year into my new career, I get another phone call saying, well, she didn't work out, you know, and what do you think? Do you want to come back and interview for this job? And I said, well, now I know what I don't know. I've been in nonprofit for a year, and I could not lead an organization at this time. No. So I turned it down and said, plus I just love what I'm doing. I'll still volunteer, but I love what I'm doing. And so I closed the door on that. And then about a month later, they called back and said, you know, we interviewed someone, we hired someone, and then this person at the last minute said they couldn't do it. And something was telling us to come back to you again. And I had just had a really tough day at work that day. And so for whatever reason, my mind was in a different space, and it said, just go to the interview and talk. You've never been closed to possibilities, so just go. You can always say no later. And I went, and it was an incredible interview, and I was just extremely candid with them about what I felt I could handle and what I couldn't, and the idea of raising $2 million a year at that time, well, actually it was just $1 million a year, was just more than I could even fathom being responsible for. And it was my husband who said, honey, this job, you've known it all along. This job was created for you. I think that this is where you're meant to be. I know you're having a good time and you're really enjoying the organ and donor mission. But, don't be afraid to take this job. This job will stretch you, and I know you, honey, you can handle it. And I did follow my husband's advice. I let him be the strong one for me in my life because he knew me better than anybody did, and believed in him when he believed in me more than I did. And I accepted the job. And here I am 14 years later in what I think is the most incredible job I've ever had. And that's after 2 amazing jobs, a career in TV news. So life, it just keeps going if you are open to those possibilities. And those possibilities only come in the in-between. I mean, that's why when you told me about your in-between podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, this is genius, because we don't pay attention to the in-between, Cassidy. And the in-between is where all the possibility is, and is where when you stop and you pause for just a moment and you think about other things and you let other possibilities come in, that during all the other times that aren't in between, you're just living your life and you're pumping and you're churning and you're burning and you're not even thinking about what could be that isn't now. So I think your podcast is genius.
Thank you. Well, and that's the truth of it, right? Is those in-between moments really define us, and obviously in your case took you to the next half of your career and the things that you're able to do now. And I think oftentimes, we're put in that crossroad. Here's the moment. In your case, you knew you were in this negative environment that was affecting you both professionally and personally. And, at one point you probably had your head down and you were like, well, let me just keep working. Let me just cash in and cash out. And then at some point you looked up and you realized you were in the in-between and you had a choice. Do I continue this or do I move on? And I think that really determines how you view success, right? Because some people would have kept going and got wherever they could have got to make the most money and do the most in that career, but still been unhappy. And to choose the other option that leads to happiness is, in my opinion, the greater version of success. And so I'm curious, obviously you're CEO now, you've gone up, now you lead an entire team, you lead board members. What is your version of success in the nonprofit world with what you do with Ronald McDonald House Charities? And how do you define success for both your team, your board members, and even your families?
Great question. I want to first go back to, you hit the nail on the head about head down, continuing to do what you know best, and foregoing your happiness or foregoing your true best version because that's all you know. And that's all in the moment you think you can do. And you're so tired. And I want to say it's never too late. I probably should have gotten out of TV news 2 years earlier. And my children later told me, they were at that point preteens, and they said, Mom, we're so glad you left TV news because as much as we loved that you did it, you were so unhappy. For about 2 years, we watched you struggle. And I'm like, why didn't you say anything, guys? And because, Mom, you're Mom, you're going to do it. You're going to do whatever you need to do, right? But don't think for 1 minute the choices that we make in our own lives don't affect the people around us, the people who love us, the people who want us to be happy too. And no matter how hard you try and fake it or just plow on and be a good soldier, you're not going to make it, and you're not being honest with yourself. So I think that the point that you were just making is that you're denying yourself the greater version of yourself, the more successful version of yourself, the best version of yourself. So, my first couple of years in nonprofit were all about, and I'm still learning, all about learning how to manage people. There was one thing I didn't want to be. I was pretty sure it was a boss. I'd never really.
How funny life turns out.
Isn't it? Be careful of what you wish, or don't. because you can pray for patience and then God will put you in the most challenging situation to teach you how to have patience. He's not going to just give you patience. So thinking about that, I was sort of like just thrown into the deep end and felt my way. And that's where I think emotional intelligence is. It's so great that we as a society are really acknowledging how important emotional intelligence is, and awareness to begin with, self-awareness, because I think that when I look back at many of my bosses, men and women, they were all trying to be something they truly weren't even. And I don't like I don't like the word imposter syndrome, but you meet those people in your life that they're not comfortable in their own skin. They have been given a certain amount of responsibility, and they are pegged to be visionaries. They're put in positions where they need to make important choices, and choices about the direction of the company or the direction of the charity, choices about what is good for their staff. All of these things, there's a ripple effect. I have a staff of almost 30 that are underneath me, and they have their families, and they have their children, and they have their lives. And so there's a sense of responsibility for creating that culture that you refer to, of being positive, of setting a high standard. And I think probably by acknowledging that the first family is our family, our team, and that if we're happy and we're having our needs met and we've got the right people in the right positions, all the other families are taken care of. It's amazing. It trickles down. The first family is our team. We have to self-care. We have to care for each other. And then everything else that we do for the families who come through our doors, we're in a much more resilient place to operate from, where we're not getting the compassion fatigue. What they're going through isn't spilling over onto us. What needs to happen is we need to be able to absorb that and release it with one another so that we can move on and be strong for the families instead of taking it from them, bringing it inside and letting it affect us. And that's one of the things that I see in nonprofit a lot, Cassidy, is people who are very compassionate and have big hearts and want to do something very fulfilling in their life are drawn to this position. But what they do is they give of themselves so much that they burn out, because that's what they've been told their whole life, and it goes back to their childhood, is that you give until it hurts. And when it hurts, you're doing it right. But we have to retrain our hearts, we have to retrain our minds, we have to retrain our brains to know that no, we're not there to give until it hurts. We're there to show them that there's another way, that there's a strength within themselves that they have never tapped. And they come in to our house and they are so raw and they are so scared and they are so stressed, and we see them leave, and the transformation when they're going there, 9 times out of 10 they're so much stronger. Their perspective is so different. You will never change the perspective of a family who almost lost one of their own or did lose one of their own. They're not going to worry about the little things. They're just not. They know how precious life is, and I think that is what guides them from that day forward. And I don't think when it's that deeply ingrained through loss or through life's challenges that it can ever leave. It'll always be that way for these families. So we see them, and I hope that God willing, I don't ever have to go through this, but if I do, if I have half the grace that these families, and I'm sure your family was the very same way, Cassidy, half the grace that you all have going through this and making it through to the other side, because what's the alternative? You shrivel up and die, and there are people who don't make it. But those who do have a resilience and a strength that's beyond what the average person carries around. There's no doubt about it. I see it every day.
Yeah. I think it's so powerful that you didn't say that your version of success is raising $3 million. I think, let's be honest, there are some people in your role in your in other organizations that might lead with that, right? And why you are so great at what you do and why you have really built such an incredible culture is because you're not leading with that. And I'm sure I could
never even crossed my mind.
I'm sure I could interview your team and they would say the same, of just like the goal, the version of success that you're chasing is that each person on your team is fulfilled and happy and takes care of themselves.
Yeah.
And what an incredible role model they have for you to stand up and say, you know, I know coming into these roles that the person who chooses to work here is full of compassion and almost to a fault, in the sense that they are taught to just work for others and never look at themselves. And what an incredible human you are to change that narrative and say, no, we can't fill these cups if ours is empty. And I think you're so right. It's especially for women. I think we've been taught that we care for other people. We do everything we possibly can for others. And it's such an admirable trait, but it does come at a fault. And if we can learn to take care of ourselves and spend that time delving into our compassion side of ourselves and helping others and building relationships and all of those things, I mean, that's what makes the world go round. But we've had it flipped for so long that it's about money, it's about giving until we have nothing left. And true success, I mean, you actually find more success when your team can come and show up with energy and excitement and feel the love and a full cup.
Yeah. Talk about an aha moment. That's an aha moment for me, Cassidy, that you picked up on that, because I've never had anybody ever say that back to me, you know?
Yeah.
That's
it's
really
interesting. Wow. Because, and I don't know if I told you this, but my parents own a supplement company and we give back to St. Baldrick's in honor of my brother.
Oh, I love it.
And one of the big things that my parents did when they were developing the business is deciding very intentionally where the money would be donated to in regards to childhood cancer. And one thing that they discovered was a lot of these organizations are not giving as much as they claim they are in these commercials, right? And I won't name names, but St. Baldrick's does give a very large percentage, and they actually are fully focused on the research for more resources, chemos, all of these different things, more funding in which the government does not give to childhood cancer. And so it's a passion of obviously my whole family that we support organizations that are actually doing what they say that they're doing.
Yes.
And so in your case, I think that's where the nonprofit world, and it can get a little bit toxic in the sense of we could be right where you were 20 years ago with the broadcasting job, right? Because if you're not doing something with intention, with compassion, with honesty and integrity, you're going to end up in the same place. You're going to be unhappy. You're not going to be doing what you truly are called to do. And so I think it's so incredible that you came from a place where you were stressed and felt negative, and now you're leading a team all opposite of those things. You're leaning into your positivity, you're leaning into your self-care, and now you're teaching that to your team so they hopefully can have incredible careers where they take care of themselves and their family is happy and they're happy and they love their job, right? Because we're so focused on work and we have to work, but at the end of the day, we need to love what we do.
Right. So many times we can take the wrong lesson. You know, a staff member might say, I have nothing to complain about. I should block all feeling because when I compare my life to what our families are going through, I have no right to feel any way other than absolutely grateful. That's that flip of the script that you're talking about. You're approaching it from the other way. You have every right to feel the way that you feel, and being next to a family that is going through this is why you're feeling that way. And it gives you the ability and the permission to look at your life and say, okay, this is real, this is not, this is positive, this is negative, and then take a stand, you know, or then decide and make a choice about what you want to do. But so many times we don't even give ourselves permission to look at our lives honestly because of guilt or because, you know, we feel like we're so blessed. But that doesn't mean that you're truly fulfilling your life's mission if there are things that are blocking you, if there are obstacles that you allow to control your life and keep you down. And so listening in the in-between times and making sure that you have in-between times. I also call them areas of gray, because life is so gray. You know, we can say we have rules here at the house and you don't break these rules or you are asked to leave. but we look at every case so individually because it's not black and it's not white. Life is just so gray, and it's muddy, and it's messy, and it's painful, but it's also beautiful. There's beauty in the pain, and if we can embrace it and get through it and not be so afraid to feel it that we just deny it, we're never going to get anywhere. But if we allow ourselves to just get through the messiness, then we know that we're going to get into a less messy place, and that's going to feel really great. The best inventions are mistakes, and sometimes life is full of mistakes, but you've got to forgive yourself. You've got to forgive the people around you. It's the most difficult thing to do, and yet it's the most liberating thing you can do in your own life.
I love that, and I love the messy. That's why I chose the In Between podcast, right? Is the messy is where you truly learn most about yourself, and you learn most about where you're supposed to be going next. And so I always end the podcast, and I always love to have this one question be answered by all my guests. Okay. If you were to go back to when you were in that career switch, or even another in-between, because obviously that wasn't the only in-between in your life, what advice would you give someone in that space right now in the in-between?
Absolutely. I would go back to those 2 years when I was struggling so much, enough to the point where my family was being affected, and I would just say, stop. I had this facade that was built up, and in TV news, it's so easy to have a facade because you've got your on-camera life and you've got your off-camera life, which sort of fed into the facade. You can go out to dinner and people can stop you and ask you for your autograph, or just act like it's a big deal to meet you, and that can give you this very weird sense of reality. And it was like, how could I ever do anything else when my whole life this is what I wanted to do? So I would go back and I would just say, look, you're stuck. You're so stuck. And you don't have to be here. You can just take a moment and really try and figure out what's going on inside your head, what's going on inside your heart. How has life changed for you? Because the worst thing to do is to evolve as a person and not recognize it in yourself. Oh my gosh, I just wish I could go back and realize that I was a different person at that time, and that give myself just a shot of courage to have made that decision a little bit earlier.
I love that advice. And I think what a beautiful conversation we've had the last hour, where you were able to reflect and give kudos to that version of you, because without her, you wouldn't be where you are today. Yeah. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know you are such a busy woman, and you're doing such incredible things, and I am honored to, anytime I get to be in your space, I'm honored and I'm grateful for you. I look up to you so much, and I just have so much gratitude that I ended up in the same room as you, and we've got to have so many incredible conversations.
You are so gracious. Thank you so much. Right back at you. I hope that our paths continue to cross. Look forward to the next time I get to give you a great big hug in person, and thank you for having me.
Yes. Right, I need to be following up with getting some volunteer hours over at Ronald McDonald House. So would you go ahead and let my audience know where they can follow along the Ronald McDonald House, and Absolutely. If they're interested in learning more or potentially being a volunteer, where they could do that?
Sure. I'll start with the social media handles, our Instagram, our Facebook. It's at RMHC, all capital, Las Vegas, upper lower. So at RMHC Las Vegas. And our website is RMH, for Ronald McDonald House, LV.org. And, you can find all about, our services if you need them. Our CareMobile dental van moves all around the area.
No, we didn't even get to touch on the dental van.
They can go on the website and find out whatever it is that they need. Meet their needs first. And then if there's time and there's room and there's passion to give back, then there's all kinds of ways to volunteer. So
love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the In Between podcast.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next time.